My guest today, Alan Hunt. Alan, welcome.
Thank you, Matthew. Good to be here, man.
Great to be with you. Big questions to start with.
All
Are
right.
you drinking coffee there?
I am.
And you're a big coffee drinker, a not so big coffee drinker. What does that look like?
I don't handle caffeine that well. I'm pretty wired to begin with. So 1 cup of coffee a day is about it for me.
Very, very good. What about favorites? Favorite food?
Favorite food. I like barbecue, like mashed potatoes, but nobody does food like Italian.
What about favorite band, musician?
I'm a Tom Petty guy.
Tom Petty
Tom
guy.
Petty.
Favorite Tom Petty song?
Yeah, I think Petty's life has kind of been. I mean, his career was sort of spanned the same as my lifetime. So I guess he came on the scene when I was in junior high or high school, and he obviously died a couple years ago now. But and he's from North Florida, near Gainesville, Alachua County. And so I don't know, and I don't know. I really his stuff has spoken to me. If I had to pick, I'd go with his Southern Accents album, which is the least known, probably least popular one, compared to all the stuff that people typically know. But there's some really good stuff on there. But the song Southern Accents speaks to Anita and me very much.
Brilliant lyricist.
Yeah.
Just fantastic lyrics. Just
and loves music, man. He was the guy that would pull other musicians to. He was humble enough. There wasn't a lot of ego there. And he would pull other great musicians and guitarists just for the love of music to get them together. People that wouldn't even talk together. He'd get them in the studio and just really trying to promote the craft and the art of music and guitar. So really big fan.
Yeah, I mean, Traveling Wilburys is a great story. He got so Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, George Harrison together, and there's some big personalities there, some big egos there, and some of them notorious for not being able to write with anybody. So to get them to do 2 albums and tour together at that stage of their life is fantastic.
Well, you start with coffee. I mean, there's a great Petty coffee story. All right. After he died, about a year or two, somebody had done a long, it was the guy who wrote the biography of Petty. And I can't remember his name. And he published the biography, and they came to him and said, as you reflect on Tom Petty's life and your work with him on this book, anything that stands out? And he goes, there was one story that didn't make it in the book. He said, Petty drank coffee all day. And he had some really bad lifestyle choices, so he probably needed the coffee to keep going. And he said, and Petty was always in search of the perfect cup of coffee. And so he said, what was fascinating though, was he was with somebody, I don't remember if it was somebody who was interviewing him or a musician, and they gave him a cup of coffee, and he goes, this is the best cup of coffee I've ever had. This is like the perfect cup of coffee. Of course he didn't, that weird voice is. And the guy says, do you know what it is, Tom? And he goes, no. He goes, it's Maxwell House. and Petty didn't believe him. Petty said, I got to go back and see how you made this. And he says, well, part of it is how we make it. So he goes into this guy's kitchen, and there's one of those Bun-O-Matics, that they have in like restaurants. It's almost like a commercial grade. Had a Bun-O-Matic in his kitchen. And the secret was each scoop of coffee was perfectly leveled off and made in this Bun-O-Matic. So Petty goes home and he buys all that stuff, and for the rest of his life, that's what he drank, Maxwell House.
That is a great
The perfect cup of coffee.
That is a great story.
I can't believe that Maxwell House hasn't done anything with that.
I can't believe it didn't make the book. What about favorite movie?
Close second would be Godfather. You and I share that one. But number one, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I mean, it's just a classic.
Bueller. What do you love about it? Do
you know what when Ben Stein's calling roll?
Yeah.
In the classroom there. Do you remember the name that comes after that?
No.
Bueller. Fry. This is a great movie. I forgot the question. What's the question?
Did you
Fry?
Did you skip school like that as a child?
I had a good friend who did, and I always admired that because he could get away with it. I was the one that always got caught. So I think that's why I like Bueller. Was sort of my fantasy life. I wanted to be like that, but I was always getting caught.
Tell us about childhood. What was it like growing up? Where did you grow up? What are your significant memories of your childhood?
Most of my childhood was spent in a little town in western North Carolina called Brevard. It's a town of about 7,000 folks now. It's right in the middle of Pisgah National Forest in the mountains. Beautiful place, waterfalls, kayaking, mountain climbing, all that kind of stuff. My folks worked at a little small Methodist college there that had about 500 students called Brevard College. And it was a really, really good place to grow up because it was safe. People knew each other. I would spend just practically the whole day either walking around town or riding my bike around town. Never felt unsafe. Good school system. I grew up on that college campus, so I got exposed to lots of cool stuff in the fine arts and the athletics program and things lectures and things that there was a life that I had as a kid of a professor and the business manager that allowed me to just kind of get exposed to a lot of cool stuff. So it was a good childhood. Baseball was kind of at the center of it, like your son Harry. I can identify with him. Loved baseball. Everything was about baseball for me. Everything. I learned to read by reading the box scores with my brother. Got up every morning. I was a big Dodger fan. 7:15 in the morning on WPNF. They would give the West Coast baseball scores because obviously the Dodgers were playing long after I was in bed. Played baseball as much as I could. Had a big baseball field in our backyard. Our neighbor was a retired plumber, and he got tired of having the foul balls come into his yard. So he came out one day and he brought these huge like telephone poles. And we go, Mr. Osborne, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm building you a backstop. So he puts up 4 big telephone poles and gets chicken wire, has some other guys helping him. And so we had this backstop in our backyard. It was almost like Fenway Park in our backyard. So wow. It was cool. It was cool. It was a good childhood. It really was.
What position did you play?
Shortstop. Yeah.
And did you have a favorite Dodgers player?
Yeah. This was the 70s. So that infield of Steve Garvey at first, Davey Lopes at second, Bill Russell at short, and Ron Say at third, the Penguin. Those 4 guys, that infield, those were my guys. Yeah.
And what broke them up? Do you remember what broke them up?
Yeah, I think it's been a while. I think it was when Steve Garvey, I think he got traded to the Padres.
Okay.
After a pretty long run. I think he was the first one. And then I think Ron Say's contract ran out and he signed with the Cubs. So they probably had at least a 6-year, maybe an 8, possibly even 10. Bill Russell and Davey Lopes at second short were there for forever and a day. But those 4 guys, that was fun. Back when they were playing the Big Red Machine, if Harry had been alive, he and I would have been at Loggerheads.
At Loggerheads. Yeah. What was the feeling like when your favorite players got traded as a kid?
Oh, that's tough stuff.
Yeah,
that's tough stuff. Yeah, that's tough stuff. You're not sure who to be more mad at. You're sad. You're devastated. But you're also mad. And is it the player's fault? Is it the general manager's fault? And it was like a divorce,
And they didnn't consult you.
Yeah, nobody asked my opinion. I just wanted to be able to speak into the process. Didn't seem like too much to ask. I was 8.
Yeah.
I had things to offer.
I got a lot of that going on at the house at the moment. It's like every day I'm getting an update on the trades, and
I bet.
What about who is the most interesting person you've ever met?
This sounds packaged, but it's my wife, Anita. After we had been dating 6 or 12 months, I said to her, you're the only person that I don't ever get tired of being around. And I think that's kind of when I knew I need to marry this lady. Because most people, you spend some time with them and you're ready to move on. But with Anita, I just never got tired of being around her, and I still don't get tired of being around her. So part of that's being infinitely interesting, and just part of it's her great qualities. But I know that sounds cheesy, but it's my wife.
So we can talk a little bit about that later because one of the things I've experienced with you as a friend, as a speaker, as an author, is that very often you will say something that does feel cliche or packaged or however you want to call that. Yeah. But when you start to unpack it, it is astoundingly unique and interesting. And I think as we just experienced, because I don't think most people, in considering who to spend their life with, consider what you have just considered, which is, do I get tired of being with this person? Because if you get tired of being with this person when you're dating this person, what is that going to look like?
Lifetime's a long time.
It's a long time.
It's funny because I like change. I don't like routine. I like to do different stuff. And even in my life and ministry professionally, I've done different kinds of stuff. I like that. I couldn't do the same job for 40 years. And people always will ask Anita, doesn't that bother you that Alan's, he likes change and likes to explore new stuff and all that kind of stuff? She goes, no, because I learned early on, I'm the only person he never gets tired of. She took that as a sort of like, okay, this will be fine. Alan may do different kinds of stuff, but he's my guy and I'm his gal.
Powerful.
So she's a good one.
What are you most excited about at this time in your life?
Well, as you know, I mean, and you and I have talked about this in a number of settings, some publicly and some privately. I mean, this is kind of a new chapter for me. Going to be 59 here in a couple months. We got 7 grandkids, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 6 months old. Total chaos and bedlam. And it's a new season, a new chapter where my a lot of my adult life was focused around my job, my career, my ministry, my reputation, my achievement, my accomplishments, all that kind of stuff. And most of that stuff doesn't really make much difference to me anymore. And it's a new chapter. And I realized, hey, I've got a good 20, and if I get lucky, 30 more years with a different kind of perspective. And my grandkids now matter a lot more to me than most things. And it's a time that I kind of sort of explore some things that I never got around to in the past, things that I want to do. And because I don't have to be quite as accomplishment driven. I can be more relationship driven. And in some ways that kind of makes me sad because as I look back, I realize I probably wasn't as relationship driven as I would have liked to have been over the last 58 years. But it's also a great opportunity for the next 20 or 30 years to be more relationship driven and enjoy people more than got to drive kind of thing.
What are the grandchildren teaching you?
How to drink a lot of coffee. They're teaching me, I guess they're teaching me 2 things, one good and one not so good. The good thing, they're teaching me to rediscover joy in a much simpler, purer way, because there's just a lot of joy and discovery and wonder. The pleasure of wonder as they discover things and I get to show them things. What they're teaching me in a bad way is this is a tough culture. This is a tough culture to grow up in. And so we're obviously we're still early. The oldest one is 6. Be going in, be going into first grade next year. But I can see that 10-year-old, 12-year-old window out there when the world begins to change. And first of all, grandparents don't become less important. You get more interactive with sports, with music, with friends, with phones, with technology. And I know how the technological sector, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, are targeting those folks in a very aggressive way. And so really trying to give a lot of thought to how I can help walk alongside them, because it's a really different world than the one my kids grew up in. And it's obviously a very different world than the one that I grew up in. And so trying to kind of help prepare them for that. So that feels a little more somber than the joy and the wonder, which, when they're 3 and they're 5 and they're 7, it's just off the charts.
How would you describe yourself to someone who had never met you?
That's a really hard question. I actually don't know. I think, again, it sounds packaged and cheesy. I'm the king of Velveeta here. I think I would simply say I'm just somebody who's really trying to love God. Because really, at this point in my life, that's kind of who I think that's who I am. That's who I want to be anyway. And really, I don't need him to know a whole lot of other stuff about me besides that.
What matters most to you at this time in your life, and how has that changed?
Well, I think it goes to the 2 previous questions. What matters most to me is, as somebody who's really trying to love God, and somebody who's trying to help prepare his grandchildren for a life, and somebody that realizes that my shelf life is a lot shorter than my grandkids. And the most important thing to me is my faith, and I want my grandkids to have that. So really the most important thing, and this is for Anita and me, it's not just me, really the most important thing for us is trying to pass our faith on to our grandkids and trying to have that DNA of the Catholic faith, of Jesus Christ, of the Eucharist be embedded in them. Because I really believe that if we can do that, A, we will love them well, and B, the stuff that I was just mentioning that I'm a little suspicious and skeptical about when they start hitting 10, 12, 15 and the technological world opens and everything's changing and getting bombarded with social media. And that if we can embed that now, that gives them a much higher chance of coming through all that in a healthy, whole way, rather than just getting battered by the waves of the culture. So passing on that faith and embedding it in the grandkids would be it. Really would.
When you look back on your life, your faith journey, is there a moment where you say, okay, at that moment, the faith became mine?
Well, I guess I'm Catholic. Because, as a Protestant, a lot of times it's like, this is the moment. And that was never my experience. My experience was there's been a lot of moments, It reminds me of an old Methodist bishop, actually, from my old life. He said, yeah, people ask me, when were you called to preach? And he says, well, the last time was this morning. And in some ways, to me, that's sort of this, it's this ongoing journey. And so, the first moment was probably my confirmation. We had confirmation in the Methodist church. And so I remember when I was being confirmed at First Methodist Church in Brevard, North Carolina. Dr. Tuttle was our pastor, marvelous guy. And Dr. Tuttle, the week before confirmation, he met with us. I don't remember how many of us there were, maybe 20 of us, I guess. And I think we were sixth graders, if my memory's right. And he said, now, next week's the week, and I want, this is kind of a big moment for you, and I want you to kind of be sure that you're doing this and not just your parents doing it. This is you. And so I went home to my dad, because I knew better than to ask my mom this question. So I asked my dad, I said, Dad, Dr. Tuttle says I need to kind of take this seriously. Why do you believe? Why are you a Christian? And Dad said, Dad had grown up in a Methodist parsonage. His father had been a Methodist preacher, and his grandfather had been a Methodist preacher. And so I assumed it was going to be something related to that. And he goes, for me, it was, I started thinking about, after Jesus died, those 12 guys, those 12 apostles gave up everything. And they scattered. They didn't just all stick together. They scattered across the earth, and none of them ever recanted. And they all told the same story. And it was so powerful that it had changed their lives, and they gave up everything to go do it in many situations in which either they were going to be persecuted or executed. He said, so that told me clearly something happened. And he said, that was good enough for me. So the confirmation was a big one. Then, I got into high school. I kind of, like a lot of folks, wandered off into the other paths, and I was always a little too curious. Had too many questions. So, like, our high school youth director was an older woman. I think she was maybe 70 years old, and we had this youth group of 40 or 50 high schoolers. And I wanted to, can we go visit the Catholic Church and kind of see how they do it? Can we maybe go visit the Mormon Church? Could we maybe go to a synagogue? And she just kind of got tired of my questions. So she asked me not to come back. Said, this is probably not a good fit for you. So I have the red badge of honor of having getting thrown out of youth group. My parents were so proud. It's like, oh my gosh. So I wandered away, and then I got into my 20s, and I started dating Anita, and we started going to church together. And I had a real reawakening then. And so that was another moment. And then there was sort of, a call to leave the business world and to go into full-time ministry. So that was another moment. And then when Anita and I went through a 2 or 3 period of intense suffering, that was another moment. So there's been a lot of moments when it's been a renewing of the faith really is mine. It's not somebody else's that I'm trying to appropriate or do to please. This is my faith, and this is why I believe in and who I am. That's a long answer. Sorry about that.